Welcome to the Juice Consumer Direct Podcast. I'm Nate Clegg. I'm here with Jacob Thorpe and Carson Poppenger. And today we're talking about tailor-making our messaging for our audience. So guys, what comes to mind when someone says that, tailor-making your message for your audience?
Yeah, I think that's like the main objective of any marketing team, right? Is understanding what's the message that they're trying to get across and to who. What's the most effective way to deliver that message? I think that, you know, in the consumer direct space, it's obviously super important, but I think within our organizations, it's super important. I think, you know, when I look at our business development efforts, understanding who our target personas are, our ICPs, that's super important.
I'll just say as an organization recently, we've been very focused on ICP. And Carson, you've driven a lot of this, and it's understanding exactly who we're reaching out to and who fits our organization. And that makes sense. So you said something funny though, and it kind of reminds me, when I first started here at Squeeze, I didn't realize how like into golf you guys are all the time. Like, and I hadn't played golf in probably 3 years when that happened. Yeah. And granted, you guys don't invite me a lot to golf, and I understand why. I'm not very good, but but yeah, that reminds me of that. You know, like if I'm going to work internally with people within my own organization, I'm probably going to talk about golf. I'm probably trying to go golf with you guys. And how did that start? Like, who started off the golf thing, and how did it get so prevalent within our work culture?
When did that start?
It's kind of been that way for a while. I've always, I started golfing with my grandpa when I was really young. Didn't know what I was doing, and sort of self-taught my whole life. And, but yeah, I mean, I think golf is really big part of business. You know, today, in fact, I was trying to get to know one of our prospects that we're working with, and I knew somebody that was good friends with him, close with him. And I just messaged him and said, "Hey, what is this person like? What are they into? Because I'm trying to connect." He said he likes golf and Coors Light. So
you could probably kill two birds with one stone there.
That's pretty specific, right? Too. That's what's nice about that.
And so, yeah, I mean, golf is kind of like, there's so many people in the industry, I think, that like golf. A lot of the conferences we go to, there's usually like a golf tournament tied with it as well. Yeah. And so it's just, it's fun to be outside and away from the office and connect with people in a way that's like maybe a little more personal.
I remember growing up, my grandpa's like a stick. He was a great golfer, and growing up, he would tell me like, you need to learn how to golf because like business gets done on the golf course, right? And I wish I would have maybe appreciated it more. I probably would have spent a lot more time practicing and taking advantage of, you know, all of that time. But he would come out and he'd drive up, you know, an hour so that we could go and play. And I'm so glad that I did learn, because like we've had a lot of really fun experiences with maybe our internal team, but also with our partners, right? We've been able to go out and you know, go golfing and spend time talking about the scope of projects that we're launching, or helping build relationships that then allow us to fulfill our job in a way that's
I
much more effective.
I almost killed one of our clients twice on the same hole with my wedge.
It's true. And it's lived in infamy too. I mean, it hasn't been forgotten.
Well, the bottom of every wedge is a driver. So you have to be aware of that.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, and we got to go to Lead Generation World as one of our shows that we go to, and we had a really awesome golf round with some existing partners and some new potential partners. And it's interesting because, and I'm good enough. I'm like a self-taught golfer in adulthood. Like, I don't think I golfed before the age of 24, maybe. And it's not like a distraction, but I'm not certainly as good as you guys. You guys are actually pretty good. And I know what it means when someone says that they're a stick, you know, they're pretty good at golf. Yeah. But you learn something all the time, right? But those same partners that we golf with, the group that we golfed with, like we still talk about it, and we still have internal jokes between us and one of our existing clients, Drew, right? And we still say some similar things all the time to each other about how we always parred. It was always a par because it was a scramble, you know? And some of the other guys that were there, you know, we still have great relationships with them. So it definitely happens.
Well, I think you learn a lot about somebody golfing with them too. I know that sounds kind of funny, but one, you learn like a little bit about integrity, like the way that they score themselves, the way that they, like if they're playing for money or something, the way that they the way that they play and interact with the people around them. Like you can kind of see that, but
They get super frustrated if they had a bad shot, or
yeah,
they're like ready to
some temper.
be angry.
Yeah, but I also think there's something to be said for golf is like a pretty exposing thing, right? If you hit a bad shot, there's really no one to blame but yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it's just you and a ball, and you're trying to get it up on the green and in a hole, right?
Well, occasionally someone might make a noise in your backswing.
Yeah,
So they're a
that's
little
true.
bit at fault for that. Just a little bit, right?
It's happened. Carson sometimes likes to give a little chirp,
Well, I've gone golfing with
Mostly on birdie putts.
Yeah, on birdie putts,
Yeah.
that's low, man. But well, I've gone golfing with my wife, and she doesn't love golfing. She just loves me. So that's why she's there, right?
Yeah.
And she likes to drive the cart. But in my backswing, she'll make all kinds of interesting noises and insult me just a little bit, just to mess me up. But that's okay.
Universally, though, I think everyone can agree that golf is extremely frustrating, right? Because you'll catch lightning in a bottle and hit the shot of your life, and it feels so good, and you're like, that is me. Like that is really who I am as a golfer, right? And then your next 3 shots, you'll flub them or you'll shank them or whatever. And it's kind of exposing to go out and do that in front of someone who you're trying to be really confident and be the authority, and you shank a shot or you blade a chip into your partner's shin.
Oh man,
There's some vulnerability that happens,
Sure.
right? But it creates a relationship that's a lot different than like a Zoom call where we're kind of posturing and trying to
for
be
sure.
buttoned up. Like it's a great place to build relationships.
Exposing, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's why I like scrambles. When you do a scramble
Mm-hmm.
like that, and especially for me, I'm a little bit more novice, obviously, right? Like we said. But in a scramble, you can have 2 or 3 good shots, or my goal is always like 5. If
Just
they just
contribute.
hit 5 of my shots, that's good enough for me to like, oh man, I'm an expert. I'm awesome. I can just take that moment you said of like, this is who I am as a golfer. Let's forget about all the other ones. You know what I mean? So that I like scrambles that way, and it's also kind of teamwork at that point, and you can focus on who can drive well, or who can use their irons well, or who putts well, or whatever it may be. So it's kind of fun for me on a scramble.
There's like some great analogies that we get with golf that we can share for a lot of different instances. Like we have when I'm talking with some of our agents or our employees on our team, and it's like, hey, look, this is you're what you're doing right here is just like golf, where you're just competing against yourself. You're not competing against anybody else. There's people on our floor that have different skill levels and abilities, and you're just trying to compete against what you did yesterday or what you did last hour. And I think that's an important like life lesson and skill, and you can use that in teaching the team and things like that. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think also top level salespeople will be able to identify pretty quickly who they're talking to. And whether it's creating your kind of lead generation strategy at a high level, or if you're on the phone with somebody, or if you're higher level B2B kind of like all 3 of us sell, right, to our clientele, you'll identify pretty quickly who they are, and you'll adapt to that moment. Like if you look at Carson right now, he's got a golf hat and he's got a golf shirt. And if we're going to talk golf with Carson, if we're making an analogy or something like that, or even if we're building relationships, that's a great way to do it, right? And obviously we've been talking about it for a little while too. So that's another way I think that you can look at that and say, okay, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to adapt. I'm going to tailor this for my audience.
yeah, Primo Golf. I've got a great Utah company. You can check them out. They've got some great
yeah.
golf gear.
Not sponsored.
Not
yet.
sponsored.
sponsored
Yeah, not
yet,
sponsored.
Free. That was free.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think, Jacob? What's your analogy?
My golf analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think repetitions of doing the right. I think there's this thing in golf where you talk about when you practice making your feels real, right? And the way that you do that is by getting repetitions and kind of thinking and training yourself to think a certain way. And I think in business, you need to make your feels real, right? If you've got these hunches and you've got these assumptions and these strategies that you want to test, I think that you need to try to get the data and the information that you need, and the involved decision makers and stakeholders, and make sure that that's what you want to do, right? You got to make those feels real. You've got to test those assumptions, test those hunches, test those strategies, and validate them to make sure that it works. And it doesn't always. Sometimes I think that I've captured a feel on the range, and I'm totally wrong, right? And I go out on the course and I can't replicate whatever I was working on the range. In fact, I might hit it worse because that's all I can think about. But the same's true in business sometimes. Sometimes we have an assumption, we think something's a certain way, and then we get in there and we really test it and we try to validate it and we're wrong. But that's okay. Like we've learned, there's a cost of learning, and there's something to that, right? So not getting too frustrated, backing up and going back to the drawing board and working on that swing, right?
Well, that reminds me of something we talked about recently with lead strategy. And once again, back to golf. How many times have you guys been on a hole and you're like, oh, okay, well, this dog right, especially if you're hitting for the first time on that hole, right? And all of a sudden it dog's leg right, and then there's a lump here, and all of a sudden there's a bunker that you didn't see or know about, and you've actually hit into it. And as you get closer, the hole changes as you drive closer to it, right? So I've done that a number of times when golfing, but it's the same with some of the strategies that we've done. We had a strategy, we lined it up, and we thought, okay, we had this totally figured out. And then once we start going, it didn't look quite right. And so we had to tweak it, and our assumptions would have been 100% that we were right and we were 100% wrong about it, but we were able to learn from it and kind of adapt.
For the next time you had that same question, you played the hole completely different, right?
Absolutely.
And you knew the right way to attack it. And
yeah,
I mean, there's something to be said for course knowledge, right? When you're able to say, hey, on this hole, it's a 5-iron and a pitching wedge instead of trying to drive the green,
I'm a big believer in that there's, you can always optimize things that you're doing, and maybe something's not working, but with some tweaks and some things, you can really get it figured out, and you're actually closer to winning by doing that than, changing course and direction completely. I'd worked with somebody at one time that was like, hey, this isn't working. We're going a different direction. That was always sort of the answer.
They're always going a different direction.
They're always going a different direction. And it sounds good because you're like, oh, we're noticing this isn't working, so we're going to do something different. But you kind of lose all the things that you've learned, and you're starting from scratch again. And to be able to just, make some slight tweaks using the things that you've learned, things that didn't work well, things that didn't work well, you're closer to winning that way than starting over.
In our last podcast, you actually talked about throwing spaghetti against the wall and how you don't want to throw spaghetti against the wall just to see what happens. I think this plays into what you just said too, where it's, hey, I actually know something about this. Instead of starting over, doing something different, I'm going to tweak what I already know and gradually get better as time goes on, and just perform better as time goes on as I adapt to market conditions. Because things change, people change, audience changes, and our outreach that you do changes, and you just have to be on top of it all the time.
You'll like this. There's a show on Food Network right now. Nate's a big foodie, and
I love
he lived
food.
in Italy. There's a show on Food Network right now called Chow House, and they take like all of these, kind of renowned up and coming chefs, and they take them out to Italy, and they live in a villa, and they compete each other to become Il Capo di Casa.
Are you serious? Like,
Yeah.
this is a real thing?
So like one episode they go to the market, and the fish market, and they've got to they have some challenge that's related to fish, right? And or the butcher or whatever. It's pretty cool. And you watch them, and they've got these challenges and these constraints. You've got to use these, you've got to use these ingredients in this allotment of time. And you watch these people go and come up with something super creative with these constraints. And something that I've noticed is they're like never measuring. Like if I'm doing a recipe and I'm trying to make something, I'm like, okay, 1 cup of flour, 2 eggs, like a teaspoon of garlic powder, teaspoon of salt. I have to measure everything because I have no concept of feel or instinct with that sort of thing. And these people are just like,
They just know. Yeah.
they just know, right?
Well, and speaking of knowing your audience, I would be the audience for that show. They've named it wrong. The Chow House, I feel like that's like Guy Fieri's doing something weird in the south of the U.S., not a bunch of fancy chefs in Italy. So I think they need to
You gotta
rebrand
check
that
it
name
out.
a little bit.
You gotta check
I
it
will.
out Sunday nights.
Jacob's saying that Nate's the foodie here, but like what I'm hearing is that like Jacob's kind of the foodie, but
He
the
is.
funny thing about Jacob that is
Oh,
sort
boy.
of like as you guys get to know everybody is that he knows something about everything. He's always if it's a sport or some kind of up and coming, I'm like bocce ball. He knows like the up and coming bocce ball,
Yeah, bocce.
scouts. He's scouting.
Deep
He's
cut.
he's scouting the
He's scouting the bocce players.
The bocce players. We're talking about Italy or whatever. I guess isn't it bocce ball?
Yeah, they're bocce ball's an Italian
The
thing.
old men with the
Yeah, I mean, I know how to play bocce ball, but I don't know how good the professionals are if they have anybody to scout. I mean, do you know?
No, it's just a YouTube search away though.
That's right. Immediately
we
after.
can figure it out pretty
Or
quick.
lacrosse
Jamie, pull
or-
up that video.
He's now getting into hockey because we're getting an NHL team.
I am.
So-
Carson's pretty excited about this.
Yeah.
I will say with hockey, when you are in person in hockey, for me, okay, if I'm watching it on TV, it's a little bit hard to follow sometimes. The puck's just moving, right? In person though, it is so fun. The energy is amped up. I'm actually excited. So don't exclude me from those when we go. Okay, I want to go.
Well, when you talk about knowing your audience, whenever we go somewhere, Carson's like, "Hey, Jacob, there's a sporting event," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm there." Like he knows that, and we've had the chance to go to a couple NHL games. We've gone to a
Saw
Knights
the
game.
Oilers play Predators 2 years ago.
Yeah,
Nice.
Yeah, and that was super
Bunch of
cool
Knights
seeing Connor
games.
McDavid live. Yeah,
Yeah.
But Carson's from Detroit. Hockey's like, this is a big deal. Are you Team Yeti, Team Outlaw? What's your take?
I like the Outlaws, but I think it's going to be Yeti.
I like
So,
the Yeti better myself.
Yeah.
The Outlaws sounds too westerny.
I like
you
it
know?
Raider. It's kind of like a Raiders feel to me,
Yeah,
like
that's true.
Outlaws. But I think that there's a lot of outlaw culture, like in the Wild West and things of Utah. I think that would be kind of
Sundance Kid.
be kind of a fun name.
Yeah.
There's a minor league team in Salt Lake called the Utah Outliers, and so
The Outliers,
the
like the
Outliers.
Malcolm
Business
Gladwell.
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I was thinking
pretty techie.
Yeah, I know that's interesting. Outliers.
Yeah.
We'll be the Utah bell curve or something like that.
Yeah, the standard deviations.
Yeah,
I think Utah's. I'm excited to see. Youth hockey here is like almost non-existent practically.
Yeah.
It's very small, and right now you could go down and drop in, play at the Peaks probably, and there'd be like 4 or 5 people there. Whereas if you're in Denver, there's be like you barely get any time to play. But I think that's going to change. I think as this team gets established here and the kids start attending games, they're going to want to play, and that's exciting. I predict that here in Utah that youth hockey is going to take off.
Yeah, maybe we should invest in a youth hockey
There
competitive group.
There aren't a lot of places, like there aren't a lot of practice rinks around here. Like there's the
There's
Peaks.
not. Yeah,
and-
that's the only one I know
That's the
about.
only one I know of.
Kearns, Murray.
yeah.
Those are pretty far though
Yeah.
from where we're at. For our audience's knowledge, they're pretty far from where we're at. But yeah, I mean that once again, going back to the main topic is know your audience, right? If you know Carson, it's golf and now hockey, and apparently for me it's mostly food related, and you're literally everything in golf, so that's good. But yeah. So once again, talking about audiences and knowing how to tailor make it for them. What do you think has been the most compelling lead strategy that was tailor made for an audience that really surprised you at how good it was, how good and how thoughtful it was from one of our clients when they created some sort of piece of marketing for their audience? Does anything come to mind for either of you?
That's a great question. I wouldn't say that there's like a certain prescription that I think is greater than all else, but I think there are approaches that are certainly greater than other approaches, are much, much better. We work with I think it's okay, a large mortgage servicer, just a really top-notch team, right, from the top down. And we have their chief marketing officer who's pretty renowned in the industry, and he hops on with us and he reviews call scripting with us.
Wow.
And he listens to calls with us. And this is a guy that is so busy that, good luck getting on his calendar, but he takes the time to understand what his customers and his customer base are going to experience by working with us. And he takes the time to listen to calls and to ask for feedback. And there are no sacred cows. Let's test this. Let's change this. There's a level of humility that despite all of that experience and an amazing resume, no idea is off limits, right? How do we get incremental improvement from one day to the next, from one strategy to the next? And I love that approach of like being humble learners and being involved from the top down. If your leaders are involved, everyone else is forced to be involved too.
Yeah, when you're looking at that whole customer journey and process, what's more important than what's happening with the customers you're talking with and dealing with directly. I think that everything's getting a lot more personal in marketing in general. As we get more of understanding not only just what an audience or demographic is interested in, but what specific people are interested in, and being able to tailor your message and your marketing directly to them. I mean, things are changing where ads might start following you wherever you go.
Yeah.
You know, and you may be driving along the freeway and you see an ad for a product that is specifically put there because you're there, you know, and that's kind of where things are headed. It's kind of interesting and scary at the same time.
It's like Minority Report back in the day, right? But it is true, and I think I know who you were alluding to, and for confidentiality reasons, obviously we didn't say which client that was, but that level of detail that both of you are describing it speaks to those who are experts and are successful. And the client we're talking about, they're the best that I've seen, right? Like they know their stuff. They've got it dialed in. They've done what Carson's talking about. And I remember meeting with him specifically when we went out to visit, and he got really into the details with us then too. He got really into the weeds and knew his consumer, and he knew how to adapt for him. It was actually really impressive.
Let me say one thing. In order to close that deal, we may or may not have gone golfing.
We absolutely did. And by we, I mean you and James, our COO, did.
Yep.
I got left behind. I took some calls though. That's okay.
I was sick that.
It was so hot that day.
Oh,
and I
man,
called
James. Oh, yeah.
our COO. I'm pretty sure he had heat stroke. And
Yeah.
I called Nate.
He's like, come get us.
First, I'm like, I need you to bring some water out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think James is having a heat stroke on the 18th.
He might have had like a minor heat stroke. I think that like he was normally, James, our CEO, is amazing, and he's normally super buttoned up and under control and knows what's going on. He was scattered brained for sure.
So he was seeing ghosts out there on the 18th.
Yeah, for sure.
But Nate comes running out with some water, and
Yeah, I was
I'm really
worried
about him.
It was a hot day.
Stay hydrated.
Yeah.
Stay hydrated. Hydration is key.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, I think we got it covered.
Yeah.
Anything else? Any parting thoughts on golf and business?
No, I mean, I think this is something that we could just talk about, knowing your audience. I think internally it's so important too, recognizing who your internal clients are and making sure that the team that you put together that's going to be attacking these problems really has an understanding and a liking for each other. Spending the time to get to know your people and getting to know your managers and the people who report to you will really enable you to be like a leader.
Yeah.
And to lead from the front. And I think that's huge. I think that's a value that Carson is really instilled in kind of the Squeeze DNA.
Yeah.
And it's something that it's important. It's really important. Know your team, know your audience.
Yeah, I agree. And I will say that I've been here for about a year now, and as far as our operations go and how smooth it is and how cohesive the team is, it's second to none for sure. Yeah. So it's been really impressive.
My only parting thought is just continuous improvement. That's part of our culture too. It's like, we're continuously improving. That's something I took from a company I worked at 25 years ago. That was a big mantra for that business. And we've applied that with Squeeze. It's always looking at improving things because it's easy to get complacent. It's easy to be comfortable with where you're at now. What are you doing next? What are you reaching for? How do we improve things? How do we optimize? And that's the day and age that we live in today. I was thinking this the other day. Everything's being optimized. Yeah. And it's frustrating for me in interacting with the business when something's not optimized. So optimization and continuous improvement.
Check your ego at the door.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys, let's call us out. We'll all look right here at this camera and do it. You've been watching the Juice Podcast. Thanks for coming and listening.
Leave your comments, questions, any things you want us to cover in the comments, and we'll make sure to get to those.
Like and subscribe.